Welcome, everybody. It's Monday evening. My name is Zach Burns. You're tuning into Burns and Holla. I'm the Burns. It's my fake name. And then we have Terry Holloman, that's his real name.
It's my fake name, too.
Holla, yeah, Holla is just a contraction. And it sounds just much better than Zach and Kerry, which doesn't sound like a show anybody would be interested in watching. Tonight's guests returning. This is our first return appearance. Amanda Knox and Christopher Robinson.
Oh, we're so flattered.
Yeah, you're becoming our Carson Jimmy Stewart, to start with a very young person reference. And then from formerly, I don't know, Katie, I don't know if you still like to be referred to as the formerly second most hated person at The Stranger, or if you want any sort of ties to The Stranger just completely cut off. But now you're the second most hated co-host of the Blocked and Reported podcast. I appreciate you coming aboard. By the way, you're way more hated. You were way more hated than Dan Savage ever was.
You know, I think that's true only like recently. I think that Dan was really hated in like the 90s, and like when conservatives had cultural power, Dan was hated. But things have shifted, and now I'm the most hated, or the formerly most hated.
Different kind of hate. Like that was
different kind of hate.
We could all be like upset about now.
Yeah, that was fun hate.
Yeah. Let's start. We were just talking about it. If you see everybody's Twitter accounts, Amanda asked if Sean Foyt, which I had to watch a couple of interviews with him, and I don't think anyone is exactly sure how to say his name, but Sean Foyt is a mask-defying pastor who started having wasn't necessarily as upset about the restrictions on church gatherings as he was about the fact that you weren't allowed to sing in California because singing projects the virus a lot further out than if you're just merely talking. So he had a couple of mostly outdoor, mostly maskless gatherings, and he's a Christian pastor. And he looks exactly like you would want him to look. Like he looks like someone who would be in a Creed cover band and just have no shame about it whatsoever. And then was in Portland a couple of nights ago, was in Seattle yesterday. And it's been a weird news cycle for the past 4 months, but seeing kids get dunked in Cal Anderson Park was maybe the strangest. Everything else has been like, oh yeah, I understand why this has happened. It's still sort of weird, but I never thought that there would be a Monday morning newscast leading with Sean Foyt, long-haired Christian hymn singing pastor, dunking kids in Cal Anderson Park. That was probably for me the strangest thing I've seen this summer. What are your initial thoughts on Amanda and Chris? We'll start with you. Are you? I've kind of become into this dude. But go ahead. What do you think about it?
I mean, we're about to out ourselves as raging atheists right now.
Me too.
No, and it's going to probably offend lots and lots of people, and I'll say it to protect my love. But I think this is kind of another example of how religion is a more pernicious than helpful force in the world, because a lot of people defend the dogmas of religion by saying, well, they teach principles of love and hope and justice and except that all of that love and hope and justice principleship gets compromised for the sake of dogma all the time for religion. And I think that the baptizing people in crowded events at a park during a pandemic is a perfect example of that. Mm-hmm. Where, valuing the fundamental like necessity of human life and how precious it is compromised for a bunch of dunkings and as symbolic gestures. And I think the world would be a much better place if we all practiced mindfulness instead of religion. So I'm sorry, I hate religion. You know that. And I'm sorry if anyone's religious and here that I'm speaking to, but that's just how I feel about it.
If someone, it's always weird to me if someone doesn't like the fact that you're religious, it really shouldn't matter to you. It's kind of like, I don't care if someone doesn't like a particular band or particular film that I like I do. So, you know, it wouldn't bother me. Terry, someone from The Stranger did a very scientific poll and talked to 5 people, as they are wont to do. And all of them were from Snohomish, where you live right now. But obviously you weren't there last night. I
missed the email. Obviously, I'm not
That is a weird thing. I don't know how word spread of this. Yeah. I don't know how so many people are aware of this person. He's got for a pastor, a somewhat meager following, but he got a big turnout again last night.
I have some questions. I don't know a whole lot about it. The questions I have, first of all, he's from where? He's from California.
California, yeah.
And so, and does he have like a traveling church, or does he have a cult following, or what's the deal? That's secondly. So he's from California.
He's got a band. So his band is what travel. This is technically like a musical tour, really.
Wow.
So his band is also his flock.
Okay, so he has a band. Does he have a denomination? Does he say I'm a Presbyterian, or I'm a non-denominational, or I'm Baptist, or whatever? Or is he just, hey, come one, come all? He just all preachy, love, God, everything enveloped into one.
It seems to be more that. I didn't hear him. Yeah.
Christian,
so, Unitarian, I suppose, or
Unitarian. Is that something new? I've never heard
not.
Unitarian? Oh, that's it.
Unitarianism. No, I just think here's my thing. Whatever it takes, I guess, for you to get by and to feel comfortable and to feel a sense of peace and to feel a sense of normality, as long as it's not offending anyone, hurting anyone.
But I guess that was the point. Is that apparently the largely maskless crowd was offending. There were some counter protesters there. Obviously,
California always going to be offended by something, right? But I mean, I'm of the frame of mind like even if we don't take this character, whoever he may be, if we just look at the normal traditional mainstay religions, whether it's Islam, if you can have peace, if you can be a better person by you dealing with Allah, and that's what you call him, so be it.
Yeah.
If it makes you a better human, it makes you do better things while we're here, treat people nice, treat people kind, do unto others, that same mantra that we should all be living by. I'm for it. But when you start delving into the realm of like weirdness, where you have like weird type of, I don't even want to call it. It's kind of cult like some cult like behaviors of the people following, and some of your ritualistic things that you do. I don't subscribe to any of that, man.
Katie,
go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, because Katie pointed out that I saw last night too that this was a weird visual.
Yeah, I think that people who don't live in the area don't realize how strange it is to have it in that particular location, right? So Cal Anderson Park was named after the first gay legislator, I believe, who died of, I think, AIDS. And not just that. I mean, it also is a place where, like, I'm assuming, like, in the 90s, before we had things like dating apps, there was probably like a robust like hookup culture in Cal Anderson, the same way that there is now in like Volunteer Park. And so, right, cruising,
yeah.
Which is primarily gay men indulging in this like behavior. And so to have this like baptism in that spot, which is also right where a month ago or 2 months ago there were like chicken coops being built for Chaz, Chop, whatever you want to call it. It's just like the irony of this is just like, it's very funny. And I think because most of the people who were involved in this protest or like mass baptism or whatever it was aren't from Seattle, they don't realize like the irony of the location they were in.
Of course they don't.
Of course they don't. Of course they don't. Yeah.
But the reason that I kind of, and I think religion just, it's a boring take at this point, but it corrupts us. Like it never seeks to do what people, and then especially it happens during Christmas time. Like people are so like Christian in your face, like Merry Christmas, you fuck. Like I'm saying it because like this is what I believe. Yeah. But I just started watching interviews with him because again, that gaggle of letters I had no idea how to pronounce. But then I kind of just sort of like the dude. Like that's
how they get you.
You can volunteer and disagree with what he's doing too, like for the record.
He does sort of have a point where it's like I want to have these gatherings and make them as safe as possible. And last night wasn't a great example, but we've seen protests that are also in defiance of Inslee's order, and nobody is, and he even says that, like, I support these too, but if and then he had some sort of specious facts when he was talking to, he did an interview in Los Angeles at their local, I think Fox affiliate, and was citing some stuff as to why we need religion back again. He said child molestations are at an all-time high, which I looked up and couldn't really find any sort of evidence to support that. But his whole message was like, people are just bummed out, and I'm this long-haired, I don't think he seems more like a boogie boarder than a surfer. Like I don't think he actually stands on the board, but he didn't bug me as in the sense he wasn't doing this. He wasn't like Josh Freed, who was again another person. He ran for governor against Jay Inslee, who was like religion in your face. Like it's not like I'm doing this as my beliefs are like a protest, and I'm angry that you don't support them. He was just more like, I'm this dude who's out just trying to get people to sing his band sounds a lot like Coldplay, almost exactly.
The thing that like bothers me though is like the hypocrisy, because like you can do a lot of uplifting things via the internet. People do it all the time. Like I've seen some incredible YouTube videos of people like doing sketch comedy routines, like for the people. And, like there are ways to extend your following and to do outreach without just drawing people into a public space in defiance of things that are supposed to be protecting our lives. Like I would love for this whole pandemic to be over so that we're all less bummed out, and the sooner we all like come to grips with like be at peace with the fact that we don't get to go outside like we want to. Like, I'm sorry, maybe the prison person has to be the one to say this, but like sometimes you don't get to leave. I'm sorry, like you don't.
But there's such a contradiction between like, all right, so all of these Black Lives Matter rallies that have had way more people, and granted, like more people wearing masks. I mean, that I think visually, at least, that's the difference between the Black Lives Matter rallies or Chaz or CHOP or whatever you want to call it. And what happened this weekend is that those people were wearing masks. I mean, but it's still the same thing where I'm sure those people who showed up at that rally yesterday felt like this is righteous as the people who show up for Black Lives Matter feel. And so, we have this problem where like you have public health experts saying like, well, racism is the real pandemic or whatever. Like it's okay to like go out in public for Black Lives Matter, but not for this other case, not for this other cause. When, even if you support one and not the other, like the people who support the other one feel as righteous as the people who, are supporting Black Lives or whatever. So it's just like very confusing. Everything is very confusing right now, but it's this contradiction that is like kind of hard to wrap your mind around.
It is. And I just remember seeing the same nurses that were telling everybody to stay home.
Yeah.
Also applauding people on their way to a protest. And
right.
I don't think of that's as much of a statement on the protests and the gatherings as it is the policies that have been very confusing now, because we shut everything down. All of us lost our jobs,
right,
or whatever, and we were told that if we went outside, it was dangerous. But now it's been 2 months now since there's been mass gatherings in Seattle, and there's just this really fractured trust between people like me and the government when it comes to recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so easy to understand that. I feel the same way, in part because we look at the mask recommendations from the very beginning, which were like, don't wear a mask. Don't wear a mask because we're going to protect the frontline workers. And then all of a sudden it's, you have to wear a mask. It's super confusing. I don't know, like, I'm very concerned about
the mask, right? It was, don't buy up all the masks. And we were worried that if you told people to wear a mask, none of the people in the hospitals would have them.
And people would be buying them up like they were buying toilet paper. And I haven't seen a 409 bottle in months now. So I think that was like the recommendation.
Right. But there were some public health people saying like, this doesn't matter or whatever.
Fauci said that. Fauci said that. He did. Yeah. And we learn. And when I first heard about, coronavirus, I dismissed it the same way that I dismissed other pandemics but then you learn and you get new information. Fauci and everybody else who is credible has clearly changed their tune, but there hasn't been this really clear path going forward. It's like the government said it's worth shutting everything down because we need to keep everybody separate and you're not behaving responsibly enough without this shutdown. And then we had these protests, and I don't want to talk about the justice element of them because clearly the issue is worthy of a protest, but it's like, well, then you can't just skip that question the way that Fauci did. You can't just say, well, these mass gatherings are bad, weddings are bad, funerals are bad, but protests are okay because the virus has no idea what the fuck's going on with all of us. It has no idea. Yeah, it doesn't care at all.
And honestly, like, I'll also go out a limb and say, like, I don't think people should be getting in mass protests right now. Like, I know it's a really big issue, but like, a long history of incredible racial injustice in our country that has, changed and evolved over time is not the same thing as a pandemic. I'm sorry, it's not. It's really like biologically, materially not the same thing. And like, there are so many ways that we can all be working on becoming more aware of a really, really important issue. I think that has been like one of the most beautiful things that has been going on right now, is just like simply people being like, oh yeah, that shit happens. Oh my God, it didn't happen to me, but it's happening to other people, and that's real, and I should care about that, and I should stop blaming the victims of it. Like, that is all wonderful. But I honestly, like, I have not, as much as I'm like in the sort of like, racial justice world by being a sort of mass incarceration person, like I'm trying to like do what I can to eliminate mass incarceration, like all of these things. And I have not been to a protest. I didn't go because I didn't think that it was responsible to do so. And I couldn't recommend that anyone do so either, because like, unless we're all going to stand 6 feet away from each other wearing a mask, which is not happening, like I'm trying to do my part to like not kill people. And I don't know what's going to help. All I know is that separating for a while is the best chance that we have. Like, I don't know. I'm not an expert on masks, on any of that kind of stuff. I just know that if I'm not touching you and I'm not breathing on you, I'm not spreading something to you. That's all I can do. And I don't know, like, it seems I'm a little bit upset that like people were taking it so seriously and then we're not taking it seriously anymore.
Yes. And we're condemning people for gatherings in one instance, and then in another.
It's hypocritical.
Yeah. And Zach, let me ask you this though. So, how much of that comes with the idea that one group of people, one group of protesters, are inherently safer, or would like to show up with the masks, and would like to be somewhat more socially distant, where others are just the counterculture? Like, we're going to show you we're not going to wear a mask just to prove to you that we're this is a hoax. Or,
well, they're assholes. I mean, that group is assholes.
Well, I mean, if you look at, I mean, basically that's what these people are. The people that showed up to spring break, or the people that showed up to Lake Havasu, or the people that showed up to whatever party. And
in 2017, if everybody who went to Lake Havasu died, I wouldn't mourn. Like, it's never been a good group of people out there. But now, they're acting But
it's all a spectrum of bad decision making. You know, it's like the people who are going to spring break and partying, no masks, and are just kind of flauntingly out there, like they're the worst, right?
They're the worst.
People who have a really good cause to protest and who are trying their best to wear masks
and who are like linking arms as a symbolic gesture of like going up against
they're
the thing.
The best of the worst. You know, they're still on the wrong side of that decision, and I understand a lot of their reasons for. You know, there's a lot of things they're doing do seem important, but like,
and
when you weigh it all together, I would still be on the side with Amanda of like, you should have decided not to go and do that.
But what if you understand that this is, I mean, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not advocating for anyone to go out there and have any, you know, dangerous behavior when it comes to this COVID-19. But what if you're sitting here and you're looking like, this is a window that I will never have again. We're at a crux in our history where there was in so much social injustice with Breonna Taylor, with George Floyd, with Ahmaud Arbery, with the police violence that was going on with our protests and marches. If I just sit back and do nothing at all, then this time might pass us by, and then we'll be sitting here a year later with nothing accomplished. And here we are. We've missed our opportunity. And so we say, hey, look, this is a chance we're willing to take for something that is greater than what we believe we're going through right now.
Terry, there was a purity to the protests, and there still remains a bit of it where people are really just out there trying to engage in dialogue. But this is a recurring theme on our show: is that's not what it is now.
Not in Seattle.
But
not in Portland either.
They're not just taking a chance for themselves. They're taking a chance on your life, right? They're taking a chance on endangering everyone else.
So what
they are, but I don't even think that they're really trying to further a cause any longer. I think that
it depends on who you're talking about. Like, I think that one thing that should be legitimately said is it's super shitty that it's had to take this long for any kind of like awareness and acknowledgement of these things happening. Like, we could have been acknowledging this back in 2017. We could have been acknowledging this back in the 90s. We could have been acknowledging this decades ago because people were talking about it decades ago. And it's super horrible that it's like come to this point. But like, I also think that, and furthermore, it's also shitty to ask people who are suffering from it to wait longer. So that is horrible as well. But that isn't to say that you can't do anything except show up in a big mass and yell at people. Like, there are other things that you can do that are constructive to the cause. And like, we have things now that we didn't have back in the 60s when the civil rights movement was going on. We have there are companies who are thriving in this time right now, despite the pandemic, because we can actually function without just showing up together. So I don't think that it's an all or nothing kind of thing. You can show that you care about something and really deeply think about what sort of constructive things can I be doing to address this problem in my own life. Like Professor James Foreman Jr., who wrote Locking Up Our Own, a really, really great book. I was actually just talking to him today, and he was like, one of the things that and he was talking about mass incarceration. So, but you can broaden this out to all kinds of racial injustice, is you can say, besides just like being a human body, like, what is it that I can do in my own life? Can I talk to my employer about the hiring practices that are going on? Can I think about what are the businesses that I want to support or not? Like, these are all ways that are really concrete ways that we can all be supporting a cause that don't require us to put ourselves and other people in danger. Like, we're having a conversation all right here, right now, respecting each other's distance because we care about stuff. That's good. I don't know.
Here's a question for you. Do you think our national relationship with the race issue is better or worse than it was now compared to in the immediate wake of Ferguson, Mike Brown stuff? Has the various protest movements and actions that have happened over the last 8 years, over 6 years? When was Mike Brown? 7 years?
6 years as of yesterday.
Like, has that stuff been effective? Like, are we in a better place now, a worse place, the same place?
But there was a breakthrough moment with George Floyd in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, where it finally started resonating with people it never resonated with before. I mean,
why now versus why not 6 years ago? Like, it's still a person.
Well, people aren't going to work right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think people finally, after 4 years of explaining why, or however many years it's been, of explaining why all lives matter isn't really a counter argument, it finally started sinking in. And yeah, there's just a whole host of factors as to why George Floyd resonated as much as, Trayvon Martin did and Michael Brown did. George Floyd changed the Black Lives Matter movement without a doubt. And have you watched any sort of NASCAR had a Black Lives Matter vehicle? Like, if NASCAR has become more progressive than Starbucks in a lot of ways, in a weird way. So it definitely had its moment. But I think that these lingering protests in Portland and Seattle aren't really doing anything to help sustain the inroads that Black Lives Matter made over the past couple of months, because there's no people of color down in downtown Portland anymore. And I see fewer and fewer people of color here at the protests in Seattle. It's becoming less about the movement and just more about just general anarchistic agitation. And that's just basically giving B-roll to the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that a lot of people should be really, really thoughtful about and if we all did a lot more mindfulness training and less just absorbing and regurgitating of dogma, we would all remember that there are strategies and there are ways of communicating information. And yes, violence is a way to communicate information, but how effective is it? And if you really, really care about something, imagine imagine all the ways that your words or actions could be thought about and whether or not they're going to be well received by the people who need to receive them. Because it's also it does feel like there's this sort of internal, just I'm communicating with my own people that I care about this by being here. And they're not caring about all the people who need to understand why it's important and what they care about, because they're just sort of preaching to their own choir.
Yes, which is a big Seattle problem. Especially when it comes to, I guess, that yesterday I met with somebody who works in the media who literally they're running on the narrative that the cops ended CHOP by staging the 2 murders that happened. And it's wow. And you're a credible member of the media. That's sort of a mindset that exists here in Seattle that a lot of people wouldn't push against. And that's sort of a big problem. And I know that's why I like following people like Katie, because you don't become the most hated or at least the silver medal most hated without challenging some of the mindset here. So this brings us to Cliff Mass in a weird way. Cliff Mass, if you don't know who he is he works at the University of Washington. He's a meteorologist, mostly. And then decided last week to do an expose. I don't know if that's the right word, a blog with some photos about his thoughts on downtown Seattle. And he compared it to Kristallnacht, which a lot of people pretended they knew what that meant immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely had to look it up. And that's bad because I have German heritage. It's really bad.
But it's Kristallnacht for dinner last night. Wiener Schnitzel and Kristallnacht.
It's good
But
with
you say a
potatoes.
word like that and you're like, okay, this definitely has some Nazi connotations. That's a very Nazi sounding word. And basically his contention was, after visiting downtown Seattle, I mean, I don't know if it was for the first time in a while, but he compared the protesters to the brown shirts, or, Kristallnacht it translates to Night of Broken Glass, where 7,000 Jewish businesses were smashed up by the Nazis. So this is Cliff Mass, who already was ridiculously controversial before, became even more controversial by comparing downtown Seattle to Nazi Germany, which is always a fun comparison to make, to compare anything to Nazi Germany, but it's rarely an accurate comparison. And the best, I think it's my favorite photo caption I've ever seen. He took a picture of someone sleeping on the street, and the caption is, "This person is either passed out or deceased." One of those two things. He suffered repercussions. He was I don't know in what capacity, Katie. Maybe he was he KNKX's primary meteorologist, or just did weather reports, and he lost that job.
Yeah, he was the weatherman. Yeah, so he was the weatherman for KNKX. He was on every Friday. He's actually a great weatherman, maybe the best in the area. Very accurate for the most part, and also accurate with sort of longer term predictions. Like when I worked at The Stranger, I interviewed Cliff last year about we had a couple years of really terrible wildfires, and the narrative from the media was like, it's going to be like climate change happening. We're going to have terrible, like every year is going to be terrible wildfires. And I talked to Cliff, and he was like, no, actually, like the rain level is high enough so that we're not. And he was correct. So anyway, he's a good weatherman. Very controversial. Before he was fired from KNKX, he was fired from KUOW maybe 10 years ago now, because he's not a climate change denier. He's not a climate change skeptic by any means. And that is something that is, I think, a label that is unfairly attached to Cliff often. He's not. He acknowledges climate change. He acknowledges the role in human activities, particularly burning fossil fuels in climate change. But he pushes back in the narrative of things like, you'll see like AOC and Greta Thunberg say things like the world is going to end in 12 years. And Cliff pushes back on that. And he's a total contrarian. He's unpopular in his department. So he was fired from KUOW 10 years ago. He was fired from KUOW this week.
Do you remember exactly what he did on KUOW that precipitated that firing? It was,
I might be getting this wrong because I haven't looked into it in years. And I remember it, but my memory is, I have a bad memory. I smoke a lot of weed. Let's make
I thought I saw a vape pen in there.
Yeah, including right now. It's after 6. I'm entitled to. So I think he said something on air about climate change that was received poorly by KUOW and their listeners. And so essentially the same thing happened over the weekend, where Cliff wrote something that I think was totally hyperbolic. I understand where he's coming from, because the visual of seeing all of these buildings boarded up, I don't think he realized this, but like lots of Seattle has been boarded up since way before the protests in response to the killing of George Floyd. I mean, buildings were boarded up because of the pandemic, because people were expecting looters. It was preventative. And so I think Cliff, I don't know if he doesn't go to downtown often. I don't know where he lives, but I think he just saw these buildings boarded up and he assumed this was all in response to the protests and the riots, which is an incorrect assumption. And I think that his analogy was a bad one. What is happening right now is not Kristallnacht. The government is not pulling people out of their homes and arresting them for being Jewish or being Black or being protesters, for the most part. It was a bad analogy. That said, he didn't say this in his weather broadcast. He didn't say this on KNKX. He said it on his blog. And I'm concerned about this encroaching. We have invited employers to encroach more and more on our personal lives. And I don't know about you guys, but I would say personally, like, you take a case like, all right, Walmart, or let's say Walmart found out that somebody, smokes pot or does cocaine at home, and they are legally entitled to fire this person. I don't think they should fire this person. And I kind of think the same way about Cliff Ness. Obviously, the situations are different. He is in some ways a representative of the organization.
He's a public figure too.
But he's a public figure. But he's a contrarian public figure. Like he is not. And he, to be fair to Cliff, he actually deleted this reference after this caused a firestorm. online.
Yeah.
But I'm a donor to KNKX, and I'm disappointed in this. I wish he hadn't too.
I wish he'd just double down and be like, yeah, that's
whatever.
That's
like
what
everybody,
it's like
we've all been there. Like people give in when
I saw stormtroopers and everything.
So I just
crazy. They were duck marching. They were,
and then we'd be like, "Oh, he's just crazy."
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
I've never met Cliff. I've seen him used as a reference several times. I just looked it up, Katie. Actually, he got fired for criticizing KUOW's admission policy. So that's
really?
University of Washington's admission policy. Yeah.
Oh, right.
So was it what was the admission policy?
The admission policy, I mean, it's Seattle Times, so it's very vague and poorly written. So local students were getting rejected because out-of-state applicants pay more. And Cliff Mass, which is actually a legitimate thing. It's definitely
right.
But you are in KUOW, UOW meaning University of Washington, and Steve Scher.
Scher, yeah.
Oh,
that's right. Steve Scher, like he said the F word a couple times on air, like briefly after this. He didn't get fired.
I think
that even seems like a less legitimate excuse to fire someone. You're criticizing the university for a kind of legitimate. He's not criticizing affirmative action. He's criticizing, So
basically, it was one of the same criticisms now that drive me nuts because people hate hearing it when it's about somebody they like, is that he didn't stay in his lane. They had him come on to talk about meteorology, and he decided instead to criticize the admissions policy. So it wasn't the opinion as much as it was the forum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems legitimate. But then again, like if he's an employee of a public institution, he is protected by the First Amendment. And KNKX is, gets federal funds, I assume, because it's a public radio station. But they're not affiliated with UW or any other public institution. So he would, I assume, not be entitled to the First Amendment protections that he would have been as a KNKX employee.
I think that you should be able to, like, whenever you go and you do interviews or you write a blog or you put something online, you should just follow the rules of Twitter and just say the thoughts I'm about to express are my own and not my employer. Like, isn't that what everybody does on Twitter when you have media?
Yeah, he might even have a disclaimer on his blog. I mean, legally, it doesn't matter.
Assume that a weatherman's opinion about something that isn't the weather would be representative of the radio that he is employed at anyway. The thing that I'm sort of a little bit baffled about is okay, we've decided that this is a morally compromised person. We can debate whether or not what he did makes him a morally compromised person, but one, who isn't morally compromised? And two, what kind of jobs are morally compromised people allowed to have? Right? Is a weatherman just are you unfit to be a weatherman because you've been morally compromised in a way? What about a garbage man? What about a seamstress? Why is that why is his personal blog somehow representative of his position as a weatherman?
I think you're totally right about that. And I keep wondering, why have we this? And I do think that this is an example of what we would call cancel culture. And why is it that we have decided that the boss is the person who gets to dictate morality and dictate truth and dictate what is right or wrong? My solution to this is just, instead of complaining to someone's boss, why don't you just call their mom? Call the husband, call the wife, why have we decided to give bosses of all people this power to legislate what we can believe, what we can write, what we can think outside of work?
I don't know. I didn't even see a massive plea to KNKX to fire Cliff Mass. They made that decision so quickly, which is in a lot of ways to make.
Companies were scared.
They're terrified.
They're scared they're going to lose listeners, which in turn loses revenue, which we cannot have any loss in the bottom line. No, I as angry as it makes me, and I got the first time I got fired I wasn't part of his show, but it was in the wake of the whole Imus controversy, where I was at a similar station and eventually it was clear that we were all going to get let go. And I was never mad at CBS Radio for making that decision. It's this is the easy decision to make. I get it.
Like I get why what made me mad, I suppose, was the people who are, and this is kind of my definition of cancel culture, is that it's not necessarily the result. It's just this desire to have something taken away from someone that you don't even really know.
Yeah.
There's one particular thing that you don't enjoy about them. Or even before you had no opinion of them whatsoever. And there's even amongst people you supposedly love, when they lose something, it kind of brings you a little bit of happiness. Like a lot of my friends are stand-ups, and nothing makes them happier than when one of their friends bombs. There is sort of that enjoyment there. Yeah. And I feel like that's what fuels cancel culture more than anything, is that, oh, we did it. Like we brought down Cliff Mass, or we brought down Johnny Depp, or
I wonder how many people even want that, though. Do you think that there's actually a significant number of people going, yes, Cliff Mass is done for?
I doubt it. I would say that the whole cancel culture thing reeks of all of the problems that are inherent in the criminal justice system, which is that when somebody does something we don't like, that we decide that we're going to punish and erase them. That's the way that we've dealt with all of our problems since forever, and it only leads to more problems. And like for me, it's just like such an obvious, like it's obviously the same thing. And like I feel like we always should be tempering our impulse, our very easy impulse, to be like, I just want to enjoy, like I want that Schadenfreude moment of that person being punished and erased, and then I can move on with my life pretending that they don't exist anymore. And that's the thing. Not how it works.
But we don't understand that taking somebody's livelihood away from them, we don't think about it the moment that it happens. But that's I even feel for some of these people who get put on, caught on tape yelling about masks or whatever, and then lose their job at Allstate Life Insurance or whatever it is. Like that's a big deal for them, for being upset for 16 seconds and caught on tape, and you don't know if they have a family it's the lowest moment of their life, right? Well, maybe not, but it's the lowest one caught on tape.
It's kind of like Amanda just said, though. You compare that to the criminal justice system. A lot of these people that are caught up in the system had a moment, a lapse of judgment, a system where they're weak, where, listen, I need this right now, and I go do it, and I'm stuck in prison for the next 20 years.
And that's what I don't get, is that so many people who are against cancel culture are totally in favor of ban the box.
No, who are for cancel culture, who deny that cancel culture exists.
Right.
Yeah, that's also why I'm constantly going mad. You sound crazy right now.
Amanda, I'm curious. I mean, you know better than anybody the repercussions of a media storm of being unfairly blamed. So when you see something that you feel is outrageous and egregious on Twitter, do you participate? I mean, this is a struggle that I constantly have, where I'm against cancel culture. However, it is fun to be a part of a mob. It is fun you feel self-righteous. It is absolutely human nature. And so I like constantly struggle with this problem where, like, if I see something particularly egregious, and for me, usually it's the hypocrisy. It's a canceler who I want to call out, but you can cause the same effect. So do you participate in this all, or have you, like, what do you do when somebody is being like just a dumbass on Twitter?
Okay, so my strategy is to not empower the asshole with my energy, and instead try to empower the people who are suffering the consequences of that asshole with my energy. So, like, if I think that somebody is being totally unfair to a single person or a broad swath of people, I'm going to turn my attention towards the people who are suffering the consequences of that, be it mass incarceration, be it public shaming, and I'm going to try to put my energy towards that person, because I do think it matters the way that we expend our energy. And if like, I only have so many reserves of, like, I can only care about so much in a given day, and I would much rather care in a positive way towards someone than to care in a negative way towards someone, because ultimately I feel like attention is currency. And if you are giving attention to a person to call them out, that is also a kind of currency that you're giving them. So, like, I don't know. Like, have you guys seen the film Merlin, where they make the evil witch lady disappear by ignoring her? I don't know. They're like,
no, genius.
I know this. I know this much. After this meeting, I'm going to get your number. You're going to be my new counselor because I needed that. I need that because I find myself pouring my energy into these assholes, as you call them, more than just because, like Katie said, I look at some of the stuff out there and hypocrisy abounds. It's everywhere, and it's coming from our leadership at the very top. And that's the thing that infuriates me the most, is when I see
that's the scariest.
people who are supposed to be in charge, people who are supposed to be the adults in the room, who engage in so much hypocrisy and falsehoods, and I end up calling people out. I try to use some levity a lot of times too, when I do it, because some of the stuff is just ridiculous. So I like to point out the ridiculous. So sometimes maybe that's adding on to it, but I need to, like Amanda said, do better at channeling my energy into the good and not the bad.
Yeah, well, I've fully embraced negativity. I don't know how to change. I have so many relationships just complete. My best friend, I can't remember the last time I said something nice to him.
Oh yeah, I'm the same way.
It's just every conversation is, this is why you're a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
And then this is why I'm a piece of garbage. But I don't. There was a good example over the past week, and Amanda, I'd love to know what you think about this. There was someone who tried to have that viral moment where they call out a worker who's Kroger Andy was his name.
Yep.
And I work 2 shifts a week at QOC. So honestly, I please come and set up some sort of moment like this where you are not wearing a mask, because I'll set up that GoFundMe so quick, and we'll go 50-50 split. But so an activist, and I read her bio, and it's so annoying.
Danielle Moscato. I just want to put that out there. Danielle Moscato.
So she went into I don't know what it's called in Louisville, but a Kroger, and someone was not wearing a mask. She approached them instead of just not going near them. And then told an assistant manager named Andy that this person wasn't wearing a mask, and Andy didn't do anything because Andy doesn't want, like a lot of us who are now dealing with public who doesn't wear masks, wants to avoid any sort of confrontation because we're not trained in this. And also we're just not that interested. It means that we have to get close to the person who's wearing a mask, and we just would rather you both move along. And so he did nothing. She took a picture of him. It was like, his name is Andy. He doesn't want Twitter to know that. And the reverse happened to her as compared to what she wanted. She wanted to have this moment where she called out another asshole, but everybody just fell in love with Andy, who just looks like a very nice person. You
know what? I think that Snapchat could do a tremendous public service if it offered everyone a free filter to blur out faces and identities, so that people could call out bad behavior without having to destroy a single individual's life and make them the scapegoat of a bigger issue.
But she was intentionally trying to destroy him.
Well, I know, but I ultimately think that depending on, I guess I didn't see this. So apparently this guy has a very cuddly face. That's great. But not everyone has a cuddly face. And then
it's like $20 an hour.
Yeah, but it's like, hey, let's all throw stones at this guy, Andy. Oh no, wait.
Andy was wearing a mask, by the way. I want to point that out.
Let's throw stones at the person who tried to get us to throw stones at Andy. It's like, the problem is that we're throwing stones at people. It's not, the target of the stones is important. That matters too. But in the ideal scenario, we're not throwing stones at anybody.
Yeah, I would say in the ideal scenario, you zen the fuck out and go okay, what do I actually care about? And am I indulging in, just a sort of part of myself that really gets off on jabbing at people? Or am I participating in something that matters to me? And again, we only all have so much energy and so much attention. And I think that we're all spending it pretty poorly.
Well, and is it effective? Like, does it actually lead to the kind of world that you want?
Well, it was effective in this case in that Andy ended up raising $17,000 via GoFundMe. Well, he didn't, but the people who felt for him.
It was Target Tory.
Target Tory.
Yeah, Target Tory. Another woman who was somebody attempted to publicly shame. And I want to say, like, yeah, it was the two people who were in Danielle Moscato and David Levitt were both blue check marks. And so you have the added sort of like, thank you to the blue check mark, which is a totally arbitrary designation, which mostly comes if you have like, I mean, obviously, like Ahmed is a public figure, but like for me, I have a blue check mark because I worked at a place that at one point like went through the process of like getting people verified. It's an arbitrary distinction.
It's totally arbitrary, and I have to tell you that I don't think I earned it on my own regard. I just happened to meet one of the founders of Twitter one day, and I was like, "Hey,
yeah, you should have one."
And you I don't know if you can lose it because I was a blue check mark. And
what did you do?
If you mess up.
Well, I didn't mess up.
Unname yourself.
Well, I messed up in that I didn't please my misogynistic program director, so I got fired. But I also changed my name because Kyra was in there.
Yeah.
That would have made no sense to my next employer.
There are very particular rules. You have to like have your real name, but they will also like John Kay, a Canadian journalist, lost his blue check because he like too many people complained about him. He didn't change his name. He just pissed too many people off. Yeah, yeah. And he's very funny. Yeah, yeah.
And then
I got a poll question for everybody here before we get off the mass subject. So talking about our friend at Kroger and just all the mass shaming and whatnot. So, but show of hands, how many of you are ardent mask wearers when you're out? Wear a mask. Okay. So how many of you would actually, if you were in the grocery store and saw somebody without a mask, would call that person out?
We actually had to deal with this.
I would not.
This very question a week ago in Kent. We went to go visit my brother's little quarantine cell, and down in Kent, I tell you, they're not as strict in the grocery store as they are around us. And there were, I don't know, a dozen people there not wearing masks.
Yeah, we were actually shocked. We were like, really?
For each one of those groups, it's like I was walking around buying my crap and thinking, do I walk up to them and like get in their face? Do I tell them? The effective thing to do would probably be to approach them nicely and not to just flip them off and say, wear a fucking mask.
No, yeah. It'd be even better if you carried around a basket of masks.
Extra masks.
But it's like,
what do I do it looks really good on
big beefy like construction worker looking dudes.
Bring out the eyes.
I'm not going to walk up to those guys and get in their face. They're probably going to say "fuck you" to me.
Yeah,
because they don't care already anyway, and they're going to consider me to be a moralizing proselytizer.
You're a snowflake. You're a liberal.
So maybe someone with like Bambi eyes can be walking around stores.
Like Amanda Knox needs to do it.
True.
You are the person.
When we were in Eastern Washington a few days ago, like seeing all the Trump 2020 signs and even Trump 2024.
Yeah, handmade Trump 2024.
It's like when you see all those signs, and it's like even given everything, all the stuff that's happened all the way up to now, people are flying those Trump flags next to their American flag. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. He could do anything.
It's their
that makes sense to me because
how are you gonna if those people are still proudly displaying the Trump flag?
Yeah.
Then how are you going to walk up to that person who doesn't want to wear a mask in the grocery store and convince them in your 5 seconds that they're wrong about? 3 years haven't convinced these people that Trump's not the smartest dude.
No, if anything, he's gotten smarter.
Yeah, I think that would in many cases have the opposite effect where
and that's the reason why one of the reasons the catalyst for that question that came to my mind is this weekend I went to the grocery store and I saw a man in there without his mask, and he had his son with him, and it appeared to me, and honestly, I'm a pretty good judge of character when I see it, that he was looking for someone to say something to him. Like he was walking around with this, like you either have to have been in a cave or underneath a rock or frozen in ice to not know you gotta wear a freaking mask when you're out, right?
Anyone who's not doing it now, it's clearly
it's a statement.
Yeah, it's a statement. You wanted me to come over there and say something to you, so you could berate me or say something, and we start some kind of altercation. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to give you that satisfaction in the first place. And second of all, I mean, I'm just gonna stay away from you. I don't want to catch whichever is on your breath.
What I see, because I work at a QFC where there's enough deranged non-mask wearing people coming in every day that I could spend my entire shift confronting them. But for the most part, I don't want to get bitten, which I feel like is what half of them would do. And then the other ones, it's you're right. I don't think even, Amanda, like approaching them and trying to reason with them like as to why you wear a mask would even work. No, coming from someone like me. Yeah. So we just don't bother. My HR director basically just started wearing one like a week ago. So I mean,
what you can do is make it easy to wear a mask. So if you really wanted, what you want to do, and like an economics person will tell you this, is just make the easiest path the one where they wear a mask. And maybe that's where, maybe the easiest way to do that is to have masks readily accessible wherever you go. Have there be a little social encouragement, every time. Maybe that doe-eyed person is just you can tell they're smiling underneath their mask. Mm-hmm. Just give them a little.
Or MAGA masks. It's a one.
Even that. Yeah.
I wish Trump would start selling them.
This is a situation where I'm fine with the gatekeepers enforcing a policy. And if it's just something like, look, we're not allowed to check you out with your groceries. You know, it's just our policy of the store.
That's so much easier said than done.
They could, you could incentivize it though. You could say here's a coupon, here's $1 off 1 gallon of milk if you wear a mask. I mean, which obviously there would be a cost to that, but people probably respond better to incentive than they do shaming.
Make it like reusable bags.
Right. But but there is it has become, it's the opposite of virtue signaling. It's vice signaling, where it becomes there was all this talk in the beginning of COVID, is the pandemic going to kill the culture wars? Well, hell no, it didn't kill the culture wars. It accelerated the culture wars. And the mask is the perfect way, or the refusal to wear the mask is the perfect way to display your political allegiance.
I will say that there has been some incredible financial exploitation of the mask movement where it's just fabulous masks for days, and somebody's making bank on these masks, and a part of me also understands why someone would be like, fuck you. Stop making money off of me.
And it's also, considering that, we were told by, as we talked about earlier, we were told by many experts in the beginning of the pandemic that masks don't matter, that masks will not save you. Well, it's not hard to see why people have this lack of trust in the institutions that govern our lives.
I also think that there's a prevailing I think that I know some people who just have a prevailing distrust of authority. And so whatever it is that authority will offer you, they're always going to push back against it because they're you're somehow feeding drugs to me through the mask. I know.
Right.
And the 5G towers and all the rest.
Vaccines, Bill Gates, it's all a conspiracy.
Yeah, the 5G ones, that conspiracy, I never understood whatsoever. That was one
I want it. What's the holdup?
You have to counteract those conspiracies with opposite conspiracies that 5G actually makes your dick bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are just about at the hour mark. So this is when we sort of everybody plugs everything. Katie, you're the co-host of Blocked and Reported. Congratulations on your success, by the way. It's really I'm glad to see that you landed somewhere outside of The Stranger. That's really great.
Thank you. It's been very gratifying. It's been great.
Yeah. So where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Kitty Herzog. The podcast, as you mentioned, Blocked and Reported. We're on Patreon and we're on wherever you get your podcasts.
Man and Chris, what do you? I always see that you're working on. It seems like you have like 3 different projects going at all.
Oh yeah,
times.
we are scattered all over the place. Currently, we have new episodes of The Truth About True Crime, which is our podcast turned into a web series that's on Facebook Watch.
Mhm.
You can find that by searching for Sundance TV on Facebook. You can find us both on Twitter at Amanda Knox and at ManUnderBridge.
Mhm.
We're also on Instagram, where basically you'll just see us and our cats, and it's great. I don't know why people don't pay us to do that. And I've been writing a lot of articles for a platform called crimestory.com. So if you want to see a lot of my like criminal justice interviews, talking about mass incarceration stuff, you can find that there.
And we have a new podcast that we're launching in October that we can't say a ton about, but
he wants to tell you.
You'll find out about it if you follow us on Twitter.
Cool.
So you can't say
foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never heard of like a delayed podcast.
Well, it was supposed to come out in March, and then the world decided to fuck off. So.
Yeah, right. Terry, what do you got going on?
Not a damn thing, man.
There we go. That's the kind of plug that I like. Yeah.
No, you know what? I will be a guest on New Day Northwest. This, I don't know what day it is anymore.
Who's hosting?
I think Brooke Fox will be hosting that day that I'm on.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Wait, can I see that on the internet?
I think you can find it on there.
Yeah,
I will make sure you get a link to it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. I did that show twice. And I think I did it once with you, Terry, where we had to answer
What was the
trivia questions. And then if we won fucking energy bars or something.
No,
like,
I won.
It.
I actually
did.
won.
Okay.
You remember? I won. It was a
I don't
payday
remember.
bar.
Yeah.
I won a
remember
payday
everybody
candy
from-
bar.
He won a payday candy. Yes, right, because that old bit.
That
Yeah, and everybody from evening was annoying. But my only plug is that I literally adopted a cat just
Cute cat.
maybe to become an Instagram star, and he hasn't. So you're very
Well,
I'll
I'll try to. Maybe we need to bring our kittens together.
sure.
And have it be like a sexy cat situation.
I feel like his window is passed, and
it's just a kitten.
yeah. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next Monday at 6 p.m. As always, it's Burns and Holla. You can find us at facebook.com/Burns and Holla, youtube.com/Burns and Holla, and all our Twitter accounts. We've been scrolling underneath here, so if you haven't followed, then I've gotten used to it since I lost the fucking check mark. Half of you bailed. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys.
Good to see you, Katie.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you.